My son vanished, along with $3.8 million. And overnight, the world told me I raised a criminal. If you think betrayal always looks the same, stay until the end. By the time the rain slowed, the streetlights had smeared themselves across the windshield like long, tired tears. I was still in my robe, the thin blue one with frayed cuffs, standing in the doorway with the phone to my ear, listening to a stranger explain my own life back to me. "Ma'am," the officer said, voice clipped, professional. "He vanished 2 nights ago." The word hit like a cold hand to the chest. Vanished. As if my son could simply dissolve, slip between the boards of the world and fall out of reach. Mark isn't a word. He's a laugh, a stubborn jaw, the boy who used to set his cereal bowl for me before I woke up because he liked to see me surprised. He is the man who once took my hand over his father's coffin and whispered, "I'll protect you, Mom." The TV in the living room kept flashing the same headline, as if repetition might turn rumor into truth. Company funds missing, financial fraud suspect, Mark Hollis. There was this picture they used, one from some company gala. My son in a suit, chin up, smile neat and careful. They made that smile look like evidence. The anchors' voices were soft but hungry. I muted them and still heard them talking. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. "Mark," I said, calm at first, then not. "Call me. Now." I called again. "Baby, I don't care what they're saying. Just pick up." Third time. "I'm scared." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Please." I tried Elena too. No answer. The rain thickened. I could taste it in the air, a metallic tang, like old pennies and hurt feelings. Somewhere, a car drove through a puddle, and the sound slapped the curb. I thought of all the times I said the wrong thing to him, and all the times I said the right thing, but too late. Motherhood is a museum of moments you wish you could rearrange. When the detective arrived, he didn't come inside. He stood under the porch light, water beading on his hat brim, not wanting to muddy my floors. "We're looking into a transfer," he said carefully, like each word had to be tested before release. "Funds moved to a private account, overseas." "To a woman?" I asked, startling myself. The question just leapt out. In the stories people tell, there's always a woman somewhere. Sometimes an angel, sometimes a storm. "We can't comment," he said. Translation: maybe, maybe not. But the TV had already decided. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood. The house had a way of answering silence with more silence. It's funny what you notice when your life starts cracking. The tick of a clock you were sure had died years ago. The way the hallway light hums, the slow drip under the kitchen sink that you said you'd fix, but never did. I stood there and listened to my own breath misbehave. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat in a chair I never use, because it faces the window, and the window faces the street, and the street had become a throat I couldn't swallow. Headlights slid past, and every one of them felt like a decision I hadn't made. The news crawled on mute, stacking words like bricks, suspect, embezzlement, shell account. How quickly a life can be reduced to captions. "I raised an honest man," I said to the empty room, my voice rough. Or so I thought. My phone buzzed. A board member. "Eleanor, the optics are terrible," he began, not even lowering his voice. "We have to distance the firm from my son?" I said. I heard myself laugh, thin, bitter. "You think I don't know what this looks like?" When we hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. I pressed them flat to the table the way nurses tell you to in waiting rooms, like you can pin your fear down until it stops moving. Thank you for being here with me right now. I mean that. People turn off when the story gets ugly. If you're still listening, you've put a hand on my back, and I feel it. I went back to the door, opened it. Let the night air wash over me. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, beyond the wet, steady hush, my son existed in a place I could not reach. Maybe your child has lived there too. The country of unanswered calls, of headlines that read like verdicts. I stood under the porch light, rain freckles on my cheeks, and whispered his name into the dark. Not because I expected an answer, but because saying his name kept him from dissolving. Mark, I said, come home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window until the rain thinned into mist, tracing the same path down the glass again and again, like time refusing to move forward. The news kept replaying Mark's photo. Former CFO under investigation for corporate fraud. 3 days ago, that title, Chief Financial Officer, was my pride. Now it was an accusation. When Mark was 10, he built a tower out of my old law books, each one stacked by spine color, tallest in the center. One day, I'll make my own, he said, grinning through the gap in his front teeth. And you'll be proud, right, Mom? I already am, I told him. Back then, the house was smaller, but it felt enormous because it was filled with noise. Mark's piano scales, the kettle whistling, the soft arguments about bedtime. After his father died in that construction accident, Mark tried to fill every silence. He was 13, and suddenly the man of the house, too young to understand what grief does when it has no place to go. He would sit next to me while I did taxes, asking about every number, every rule. I thought I was teaching him responsibility. Maybe I was teaching him fear. He used to say, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll protect you." He said it so many times, it became a kind of family prayer. When he got his scholarship to Stanford, I cried in the kitchen. He hugged me and whispered, "I'll make you proud enough for 2 parents." And he did. Every report, every award, every promotion. Mark was a headline I loved to read. I framed his first business magazine cover. It still hangs in the hallway, right above the thermostat that never quite works. I built my life around that pride. My son, the miracle. My son, the proof that I hadn't failed. But pride can be a quiet poison. It tastes sweet at first, then settles heavy. The first crack appeared the day he brought Elena home. She was beautiful in the kind of way that makes you blink twice. Sharp, deliberate beauty. Long hair, dark eyes that seemed to measure everything before deciding whether it was worth her attention. She extended her hand, and I noticed her manicure before I noticed her smile. I knew that look. I'd worn it once, years ago, when I thought ambition could keep you safe. "Mrs. Hollis," she said, "I've heard so much about you." I remember thinking, what could you possibly have heard? Dinner that night was polite, but tight. She talked about art galleries and fundraisers. Mark talked about projections and quarterly goals. I talked about nothing at all. When she offered to help clear the dishes, I said, "I've got it." But what I meant was, "I don't trust you yet." After they left, I found Mark's old mug in the sink. The one that said, "Best son ever." The handle was chipped. I washed it anyway, even though he hadn't used it in years. When they married, I wore navy instead of black, because people said black was too somber for a wedding. But I felt somber. During the vows, when he said, "I promise to protect you," he wasn't talking to me anymore. Something inside me, some small, selfish part, shut a door that day. The years that followed were polite warfare. Elena thought I was old-fashioned. I thought she was reckless. When she pushed Mark to leave his steady job and start his own investment firm, I warned him, "You don't build a roof before you lay the foundation." He smiled the way sons do when they believe their mothers are outdated relics. You raised me to take risks, he said. Not blind ones, I replied. Still, when the company took off, I let myself be proud again. I attended their opening ceremony in a pale gray dress. I remember the ribbon cutting, the cameras flashing, Mark's hand on the scissors, Elena's arm looped through his. The board members toasted him as the man who turned courage into numbers. I smiled for every photo, but somewhere behind that smile, there was an unease that never quite went away. Because success changes people. Or maybe it just exposes them. The house began to empty of his presence. He called less. Our Sunday dinners became phone calls. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. When he finally did visit, he arrived in a new car, in an old attitude, polished, distant, distracted. Work's been insane, Mom, he'd say, scrolling through his phone while half eating the stew I'd spent hours on. Elena's doing this expansion thing. I'm trying to keep it afloat. I just miss you, I said once. He looked up, startled, as if affection were a foreign language. Don't make me feel guilty, he said softly. That night, after he left, I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to remember the last time we'd talked about something that wasn't money. I couldn't. The truth is, I was proud. But pride has a shadow called fear. Every time I saw him climb higher, I feared the fall. And yet, I didn't know how to say it without sounding small. So I said nothing. When the firm made its first $1 million, he sent flowers with a note. Couldn't have done it without you. I kept the card, even after the petals turned brittle. When the firm reached $10 million, he didn't send anything. Elena, meanwhile, became a storm that rearranged every room she entered. She had ideas, confidence, and a hunger that reminded me too much of myself before the world softened me. One night over dinner, she said, "You should think about stepping down from the board, Eleanor. Enjoy your life." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. You think I'm old? I asked. I think you've earned rest, she replied, smiling that polished smile that said she'd already decided what was best for me. That night, after they left, I stood by the mirror and saw the first streak of silver in my hair. It startled me. I hadn't realized time was moving faster for me than for them. When the police came asking about the missing funds, part of me wasn't surprised. The instinct to protect my son and the instinct to defend my pride collided like two storms. The officers spoke in careful tones, as if my world were a glass they didn't want to crack further. They asked questions about bank accounts, transactions, contacts. I answered mechanically, but my mind was somewhere else. Back in the small house, back to the boy with the chipped mug who wanted to make me proud. I could almost hear him again. I'll protect you, Mom. And now, the world said he was the one I needed protection from. I walked through his old room after they left. The walls still carried faint rectangles, where posters used to hang. The bed was neatly made, as if waiting for him to come home from some endless day. On the desk lay his old compass, the one his father had given him before the accident. I picked it up. The needle trembled, searching for north. I whispered, "Do you still know where home is?" Outside, the morning light was pale and uncertain. It fell across the framed certificate from his first internship, for dedication and integrity. The irony cut deep. People talk about betrayal, like it happens in one moment. A knife, a lie, a door slam. But sometimes it happens slowly, quietly, over years of miscommunication, pride, and distance. Maybe betrayal isn't when they do something unforgivable. Maybe it's when you stop recognizing the person you swore you'd always understand. By the time I poured my second cup of coffee, the rain had stopped, but the heaviness hadn't. I knew, deep down, that the story wasn't finished. It couldn't be. Not for a mother who still kept the mug, the compass, and a stubborn belief that love doesn't vanish. It just hides until you're brave enough to look for it. And I promised myself, right then, that I would look. By the end of that week, my phone stopped being a phone. It became a weapon. Every ring was a question I didn't want to answer. Every silence was worse. People didn't ask how I was. They asked how much I knew. And I didn't have an answer for either. The story broke everywhere. CFO accused of embezzlement. Funds traced to foreign account. The same image, Mark's smile, frozen under the network logo, was on every screen in every cafe. My son's name had become currency in the market of gossip, and I was the only shareholder still believing in his worth. At the firm, whispers trailed behind me like smoke. When I entered the conference room, conversation stopped a beat too late. The partners wouldn't look me in the eye. "Eleanor," said Richard, the board chair, tugging at his tie. "You understand, we have to ask these questions." I folded my hands. "Ask." He glanced at the others, then back at me. "Did you ever suspect any irregularities in your son's transactions?" The word suspect landed like a slap. He could have said believe, or notice, or sense. But suspect, that's what you do to strangers. I stared at the contract on the table, the one I'd helped draft years ago. Clause 14.4. All executives will act with integrity and loyalty toward the firm. I remembered teaching that very line to Mark. He'd nodded, proud, saying, "It's like a family, right, Mom?" Now, I was watching that family close its doors. "I didn't suspect my son," I said finally, "because he wasn't a suspect. He was trusted." No one replied. The silence confirmed what the words denied. That night, I sat alone in my office. The city outside glowed like a lie, pretending to be truth, so bright you couldn't see the darkness beneath. Papers covered my desk. Audit reports, transaction lists, numbers that no longer made sense. At 1 a.m., I found the official freeze notice. Account 0459. Holder, E. Hollis Investments. Linked subsidiary, Mark Hollis Capital. Status, under federal review. My name was there too, because of course it was. They thought he'd used me, his mother, as a shield. I whispered into the empty air. "What did you do, Mark?" The office clock ticked back an answer I couldn't hear. 2 days later, someone left an envelope at my doorstep. No return address, no note, just a folded newspaper inside. Across the front page, in bold letters, Hollis Family Legacy in question. Below it, a smaller headline. Even his mother's firm cannot escape scrutiny. I don't remember closing the door. I just remember the sound of the paper falling to the floor. In my chest, something broke. Not loud, like glass, but soft, like fabric tearing slowly. I tried calling Elena. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. The last message came out half beg, half command. "Elena, I don't care what's going on. I just need to know if he's safe. Please." No reply. Later, I checked her social media. Her account was gone. Deleted. Vanished. Just like him. That's when the rumors grew fangs. "Did you hear? They say she ran off with him." "No, she turned on him. He took the blame." Either way, it's always the quiet ones. I wanted to scream at all of them. He's not like that. But the truth is, I wasn't sure anymore what that even meant. Because when everyone you trust starts talking, the noise can drown even your own heartbeat. One afternoon, I walked into a cafe near the courthouse. A couple at the next table were reading the newspaper. When they saw me, they didn't lower their voices. "That's her," the woman whispered. "The mother." The man frowned. "You'd think someone that smart would have known." I left my coffee untouched. Outside, a gust of wind tore the paper from a trash bin and slapped it against my leg. Mark's face looked up at me from the headline, smiling still, as if the world hadn't turned on him. I wanted to tear it, but instead, I folded it neatly and put it in my bag. Even shame, when it belongs to your child, feels sacred. That evening, I opened the safe in my study. Inside was a small box of keepsakes. His first tie, a crayon drawing of our old house, the letter he'd written me on his wedding day. "Mom, you've always been my North Star. If I ever lose my way, look up. You'll know I'm finding it again." I pressed the paper to my lips. It still smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. The next morning, the firm's lawyer called. "Eleanor, they're opening a formal case. I suggest you stay quiet publicly." "Quiet?" I repeated. "Yes. Any statement can be used against you. Or him." That's when it hit me. I couldn't even defend him without making it worse. A mother's love turned into legal risk. I hung up, my throat tight. It was one thing to lose your child, another to be told you weren't allowed to love him out loud. That night, I poured myself a drink. I hadn't touched whiskey in years, not since my husband died. But grief and guilt are cousins. They share the same appetite. I stood at the window, glass in hand, and saw my reflection split by rain. One side calm, one side broken. The city blinked below me, indifferent. And that's when I said it aloud. I gave him everything, and he gave me shame. The words came out too clean, too practiced. Maybe because I'd been rehearsing them in silence all week. I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered again, softer. "Why, Mark? Why did you have to prove me wrong in front of everyone?" But even in that bitterness, something deeper stirred. A fear I didn't want to name, because a part of me wondered if this wasn't punishment, for the pride, for the judgment, for the way I never welcomed Elena, for every silent wall I built between us. Maybe life had decided to show me what that wall looked like from his side. I sank to the floor and cried into my hands until the tiles blurred. It wasn't the kind of crying that fixes anything. It was the kind that empties you enough to keep breathing. Before we continue, have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to watch that trust shatter overnight? Type yes if you felt that kind of betrayal, or no if your faith has never been tested that way. Then the narration resumes, slightly slower, voice heavy, but controlled. After that night, the calls stopped altogether. Even the wrong numbers avoided me. The next blow came from the bank. My accounts frozen. My pension under temporary review. The woman at the counter smiled apologetically, as if she were handing me a weather report instead of a sentence. I walked home in the rain, carrying nothing but receipts in a plastic folder. The streetlights flickered. The puddles caught my reflection, small, rippling, uncertain. I had been a respected woman once. Now I was a question mark in heels. Weeks passed. The refrigerator broke. The mail piled up. Neighbors stopped waving. One Sunday, someone spray-painted "Thief's Mother" on my gate. I scrubbed it off with bleach and tears until my fingers burned. By the time the wall was clean, my heart wasn't. I wanted to call the police, but what could I say? That the world was stealing my son twice, once in money, once in memory. I just went inside and sat in the dark, listening to the house breathe. That night, I dreamed of him as a boy again. He was sitting at the kitchen table, legs swinging, drawing a sun with 12 rays. "Why 12?" I asked. "So it never gets dark," he said. Then he looked up at me, older now, the man version of him, and said, Don't believe everything they tell you, Mom. I woke with his voice still in my ears. Maybe it was just a dream. Or maybe it was something else. The part of him still reaching for me through the noise. Morning came gray and heavy. I made tea and watched the steam curl like lost thoughts. Somewhere outside, a car alarm wailed, distant and impatient. I realized I hadn't stepped out in days. Not since the whispers had become headlines, and the headlines had become my shadow. But I had to. There was one person left who might still have answers. Elena's sister, Mira. I found her address online, a small townhouse near the river. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, followed by something colder. Fear, maybe. "Mrs. Hollis," she said, voice trembling. "You shouldn't be here." "Where's my son?" I asked. She hesitated. "You don't know?" "Know what?" Mira's eyes darted past me, scanning the street. Then she whispered, "He didn't take the money, but he's gone because of it." "What do you mean because of it?" But before she could answer, a car pulled up, dark windows, engine running. She stepped back, shook her head. "I can't help you. Please, just go home." The door closed, leaving the echo of her fear hanging in the air. I walked back slowly, every step heavier than the last. Her words repeated in my mind like a looped tape. He didn't take the money. He's gone because of it. What did that mean? Was he hiding, running, protecting someone? The uncertainty gnawed louder than any accusation. I looked up at the sky. It was the same gray as the day he disappeared. And for the first time since the scandal broke, I whispered something I hadn't dared to before. Maybe I was wrong about everything. The wind carried my words away, soft and cruel, as if the city itself was tired of listening. And beneath that sound, I heard it again. His promise, echoing from long ago. "I'll protect you, Mom." But protect me from what? From others? Or from the truth I wasn't ready to see? That night, when I finally turned off the lights, the house exhaled. Every wall, every photo, every empty chair felt like it was waiting for a confession. I sat there, in the dark, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about what pride had blinded me to see. And somewhere under the same rain, under a bridge I didn't yet know existed, my son was still out there, and the story of how he disappeared had only just begun. 2 months after the scandal, my name had turned into a headline no one wanted to read aloud. The phone stopped ringing, except for debt collectors who never forgot how to find me. Even the friends who swore they knew the real me began avoiding eye contact at the grocery store. At church, Sister Louise used to sit beside me and hold my hand during hymns. Now, she moved 2 pews over. No one said it directly, but I could feel it. The weight of judgment disguised as silence. When the choir sang Amazing Grace, I mouthed the words without sound, because grace was the one thing I couldn't imagine anymore. Back home, bills stacked like bricks of accusation. My law consultancy suspended me pending review. The bank froze my account, and the firm I had helped build for 30 years removed my portrait from the lobby wall. Just like that, I was gone from the world I had made. I sold my jewelry first, a gold bracelet from my mother, a watch from my late husband, and finally, my wedding ring. The pawnshop clerk weighed it like it was just metal, not 40 years of vows. He said, 300. I nodded. I walked out into the drizzle and thought, this is what love sounds like when it's cashed out. The next week, I left the house that had raised my son. The movers didn't talk much. I didn't either. Every box they carried felt like a memory I couldn't afford to keep. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with walls that smelled like someone else's cooking and regret. The radiator hissed. The upstairs neighbor stomped, and the faucet dripped like a slow countdown. At night, I lay awake and listened to the city breathe. Every honk, every siren, every reminder that life was moving on without me. I told myself I was fine. That's what people like me do. We call collapse by smaller names. Fine, tired, just adjusting. But when I opened the news one morning and saw a photo of Mark again, the same smile, now captioned, "Suspect remains missing," I felt something in me snap. Because the world wasn't just calling him a thief anymore. They were starting to forget him altogether. And forgetting, I've learned, hurts worse than hate. One evening, after another long day of silence, I couldn't stand the four walls anymore. The air felt used up, so I put on my coat and stepped outside. No destination, just escape. The rain came soft at first, then steadier, the kind that soaks your collar and doesn't apologize. The streets glistened under the lamps, each puddle a mirror, too honest for comfort. I walked until my feet stopped thinking and found themselves near the river. The bridge ahead looked skeletal in the mist, a row of ribs holding up the city. Underneath it, I saw the flicker of a campfire, tiny, trembling, alive. Something, instinct, madness, mercy, pulled me closer. The closer I got, the colder the air became. I could hear the low hum of cars above, the heartbeat of a world that didn't care who hid beneath it. And then I saw him, sitting on the ground, back against the concrete pillar, a blanket around his shoulders, his face gaunt, beard unshaven, eyes hollow, but unmistakably his, Mark. And beside him, a little girl, curled up, half asleep in his lap. He kept one arm around her protectively, the way he used to hold his stuffed bear as a boy when he had nightmares. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. My world tilted. He looked up first. Our eyes met, 2 lifetimes colliding. For a second, he looked like he might stand, but the weight of shame held him down. "Mom!" It came out cracked, smaller than I remembered. My lips trembled. I wanted to run to him, to pull him up, to ask 1,000 questions. But pain moved faster than love. "You destroyed us," I said. The words escaped before I could stop them. They sounded nothing like a mother, more like a verdict. He flinched, glancing at the girl, maybe afraid she'd hear something she shouldn't. "Please," he whispered. "Not here." The girl stirred, rubbing her eyes. She looked at me, and there it was, the same deep brown as his when he was little. She studied my face like a memory she almost recognized. Then, softly, with the simplicity of truth, she whispered, "Grandma?" The word hit harder than any accusation. It wasn't shock that made me tremble. It was recognition, because I had once believed that child was gone, that Eleanor had lost the baby, that grief had taken another piece of us. And yet, here she was, warm, breathing, alive. For a moment, time folded. I saw Mark at 6, bringing me wildflowers in a chipped glass. I saw myself at 30, promising to raise him strong. And now, here we were. The distance between those promises and this reality as wide as the river below. Tears came before sound did. I took a step forward, but he lifted a hand, not to stop me, but to steady himself. His eyes begged for something I couldn't yet give: belief. "I didn't take the money," he said quietly, "but I couldn't prove it. She left, took it all, and his voice broke. "I couldn't let them take you down with me." The rain drummed harder. The little girl's head rested against his chest, trusting him completely. The image was unbearable. Father and child surviving in the shadows, while I had been up there, cursing his name in warmth and light. My knees weakened. I wanted to believe him, but the hurt inside me had grown teeth. "You think this is protection?" I said, voice trembling. "You vanished. You let them destroy everything we built." "I was trying to save what mattered," he said. "And by the time I realized what I'd lost, I couldn't come back." The river roared. So did my heartbeat. The pain had nowhere left to go. "I don't know how to forgive you," I whispered. "You don't have to," he said softly. "Just don't stop seeing me." Those words broke me more than any apology could. A gust of wind swept under the bridge, carrying the smell of rust and rain. A truck passed above, its headlights flashing through the cracks, lighting us in pulses like a broken memory. And in one of those flashes, I saw her again, the little girl's face tilted up toward him, full of trust, untouched by headlines. Something inside me gave way. I reached out my hand, just slightly, but he shook his head gently. "Please, Mom, not now. It's not safe." I froze. He looked around, scanning the shadows like someone being hunted. Fear was now part of his posture, and I suddenly realized he wasn't hiding from me. He was hiding for someone else. My throat burned. The rain blurred everything, but it didn't matter. I turned away because staying would have broken me completely. I took one last look at him, at the child, and then I walked. Behind me, his voice called out once more, "Mom." It wasn't a plea. It was a goodbye that hoped it wasn't permanent. But I kept walking, each step heavier, emptier. My heart felt like the compass I used to keep on his desk, the needle spinning, desperate for direction. But north had disappeared. I don't remember how I made it back to the apartment. I just remember the sound of the rain hitting the windows, steady, merciless. I sat on the floor, coat dripping, hands trembling. He was alive. My granddaughter was alive. And I had walked away. When dawn came, the city turned pale, indifferent to everything it had taken. I made tea I didn't drink, then placed the compass on the table. The needle quivered, then found north. For the first time in weeks, I spoke out loud. He said he was protecting me, and all I did was condemn him. The kettle whistled again, like it was answering. I turned it off and listened to the silence settle back in. That night, I returned to the river, to the same spot under the bridge. But it was empty now. Only footprints in the mud, a burnt piece of cardboard, and a child's pink ribbon half buried in the dirt. I picked it up carefully, brushed the mud away, and held it like proof that love, no matter how lost, still leaves something behind. The river below kept moving, dark and certain, carrying everything I couldn't say. I whispered into the wind. "I saw him. I saw the child. Please, wherever they are, protect them." Then I sat on the bench by the water, hands clasped, rain dripping down my face, unsure if it was the sky or my heart that was crying harder. And in that fragile silence, somewhere between heartbreak and surrender, a calm began to rise. Not forgiveness yet, not understanding, just stillness, the kind that comes right before something sacred arrives. The rain had slowed to a whisper. I sat on the same bench by the river, my coat heavy, my hands empty. The world was still, but not peaceful, still the way a room feels right after someone leaves it forever. Across the water, city lights flickered like half-forgotten promises. Every sound, the creak of the bridge above, the steady pulse of the current, felt like a clock refusing to stop. I didn't pray. I just breathed, because breathing was the only thing left that didn't need permission. That was when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, unafraid of puddles. They stopped a few feet away. A man's voice, calm and low, broke the silence. Sometimes we don't lose people. We only lose the way we've been looking at them. I turned. He was standing beneath the streetlight's soft halo. Tall, gray-haired, eyes steady like the river itself. He looked neither young nor old, but timeless. His presence didn't demand attention. It quieted everything around it. For a long moment, we just watched the river together. Then he spoke again. "You've been trying to fix the reflection," he said gently. "But the water only clears when you stop fighting it." I didn't know why, but my throat ached. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled, just enough. "Someone who once stood where you are now. Someone who learned that peace isn't found in answers, but in the space before them." His words settled over the air like warm rain. I looked back at the river. "My son says he was protecting me," I whispered, and all I could do was hate him for it. Orion Sage nodded slowly. "Love takes many disguises. Sometimes it looks like absence. Sometimes it wears silence so the other person can keep standing. But we only recognize it once the noise inside us grows quiet." I swallowed hard. "I can't forgive him. Not yet." He turned toward me, eyes kind but piercing. "Then don't start with forgiveness. Start with seeing. Forgiveness grows from understanding, and understanding begins when you dare to look without your fear." He crouched to pick up a small branch, dropped it into the river. The current took it instantly. "See how the river carries it," he said. "You can spend your life screaming at the current to go back, or you can follow where it's taking you. Either way, the water keeps moving." Something in me broke quietly, not like glass this time, but like dawn breaking through fog. "I thought protecting meant control," I said, half to myself. I wanted to shape his life so he wouldn't fall. But maybe I was only building the walls he had to climb over. Orion Sage smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "We don't protect the people we love by keeping them safe from pain. We protect them by learning to love them through their storms. You tried to save him from the rain, Eleanor. He learned to build a roof for both of you." The river shimmered, carrying streetlight across its surface like threads of gold. I felt something loosen in my chest, the tightness I'd mistaken for strength. He sat beside me now, his voice softer. "You know, the world you see isn't the world. It's the world reflected through your own heart. When that heart is wounded, everything looks broken. When it heals, the same scene turns beautiful." I turned to him. "Then what am I supposed to do now?" "What all mothers eventually learn," he said. "Stop trying to fix the story. Start living the next chapter." He gestured toward the horizon, where the first hint of morning was rising, a thin line of light cutting through gray. "The night is still the same," he continued, "but your eyes are different now." For the first time in months, I exhaled without shaking. The weight on my shoulders didn't vanish. It simply shifted. No longer a chain, but a memory. He stood, about to leave. "Wait," I said. "Why are you helping me?" Orion Sage paused. "Because someone once helped me remember too. Because pain is just love, with nowhere to go, until we give it a home again." He looked at me one last time. "When you go back, don't look for what's missing. Look for what's still alive. That's where he'll be." And then, as quietly as he'd appeared, he walked away, his reflection merging with the dawn light until I couldn't tell where man ended and river began. I sat there long after he was gone, watching the water carry that little branch downstream. Somewhere beneath the city, it would meet another current, and together they'd become something larger, something whole. The wind shifted, the rain had stopped, the clouds began to open like curtains after a long performance. For the first time, I didn't feel alone, not because the pain was gone, but because it finally made sense that it existed. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are." And in that moment, I understood what Orion Sage meant. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The next morning, my phone buzzed before the sun had fully risen. I had fallen asleep in the chair by the window, my coat still damp from the night before. The sky outside was washed in pale gold, thin as old parchment. "Mrs. Hollis, this is Detective Alvarez." Her voice was calm, careful. "We need to see you. There's been a development." My pulse stumbled. I looked at my reflection in the window. Eyes a little clearer, maybe. I remembered what Orion Sage had told me beside the river. Stop trying to fix the reflection. Let the water settle. Maybe, overnight, the water inside me had finally begun to settle. At the precinct, Alvarez met me with a file the color of old coffee. She didn't open it right away. "Eleanor," she said, "before we start, did you see your son recently?" The truth landed between us, like a fragile thing that didn't want to be touched. For a moment, I considered lying. But then, Orion's voice echoed again. "Don't start with forgiveness. Start with seeing." "Yes," I said, "last night, under the bridge. He had a little girl with him." Alvarez nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion she'd carried all along. "Good," she said softly. "Then it's time you saw the whole picture." She opened the folder. Documents, screenshots, timestamps, evidence speaking louder than any gossip ever had. 3 weeks before the transfer, she began. Someone used your son's keycard at the office. 2:17 a.m. The security camera had been tilted, but the lobby mirror caught a reflection. She slid the photo toward me. A woman's silhouette, hair pulled tight, a silk scarf I recognized instantly. "Elena," I whispered. Alvarez continued. "The night the funds were moved, an email came from Mark's address authorizing the transfer. But we found an earlier draft. Same grammar, same typo patterns. Created from another device. Different IP." She tapped the line of code. Another page. Flight manifest. Los Angeles to Sydney. Passenger, 14C, Elena Hollis. Companion, Will Trent. I blinked. The name scraped at my memory. A financial consultant from their office parties. Too smooth, too practiced. Now he had a face in the file. The man who taught betrayal how to spell itself. "So she took the money," I murmured. "And he, Mark?" Alvarez leaned back. "He came to us before the story broke. Confidentially. A whistleblower from his compliance team suspected identity fraud. Your son volunteered everything. Passwords, access logs, full cooperation." She hesitated, then added, "He had one request, keep you out of it." My breath caught. "Why?" "You're a board member," she said. "If you'd been linked by communication or transfer, the company's liability would have buried you. He wanted you clear." She pressed play on a small recorder, static. Then his voice, tired, steady, heartbreakingly familiar. "If I'm wrong, I'll take it. But if I'm right, keep my mother out. She's carried my name long enough." I covered my mouth. The sound that came out wasn't a sob. It was something older, deeper. Alvarez kept talking, her tone softer now. "We built a sting operation. Mark's silence made them believe he was on the run. Meanwhile, we tracked the funds through shell accounts in Sydney, Singapore, and back again. But once the circle began closing, the thieves realized someone inside was feeding us information. They turned on him." She pointed to a red line on the chart. "That's when he disappeared, not to hide from justice, but to protect the investigation. And you." I gripped the table's edge until the wood bit my palms. "For months," she said. "He's been living off-grid, meeting our informant when he can. He kept the child safe, away from both networks. The criminals and the press. My throat tightened. He was never running, I whispered. He was shielding. Alvarez nodded. Exactly. The next words came out of me without thought. Where's Elena now? Interpol's tracking her, the detective said. She and that consultant, real name, William Tennant, were last seen near Sydney. We have warrants in progress. She paused. But right now, Eleanor, our concern is Mark. He's sick. The weather, the stress. If he doesn't get medical care soon, I know where he is. My voice surprised even me. Certain, steady. She didn't question it. She just grabbed her coat. Then let's bring him home. We drove without sirens. The city was waking up. Newspapers hitting porches, dogs barking, lives restarting. Somewhere above us, the bridge waited, same as last night. Under it, the space looked abandoned. But a mother knows when the air has been disturbed by her child's breath. I crouched, brushing mud, scanning the shadows. There, a faint chalk arrow drawn on the concrete, pointing north. Next to it, a small smudge of pink, the color of a child's ribbon. He's close, Alvarez murmured. We followed the riverbank until we saw the blanket, and under it, him. Mark sat propped against the pillar, eyes closed, holding the little girl against his chest, her curls pressed to his jacket. Both asleep, both breathing, shallow but alive. Mark Hollis, Alvarez called gently, hands visible. It's okay. You're safe. He stirred, blinking against the daylight. When he saw me, something flickered behind his eyes. Fear, relief, disbelief. Mom, he whispered. I knelt beside him. No speeches, no questions, just presence. Alvarez radioed for a medical team, kept her distance. Mark tried to stand, but his legs gave out. I'm sorry, he said. Don't, I cut in softly. Save your breath. He nodded, exhausted. He looked down at the girl, still asleep. When he brushed her cheek, the gesture was so tender, it undid me completely. Her name's Nora, he said. She's 4. The paramedics arrived. Quick, but careful. As they lifted him, Nora stirred and reached for my hand without hesitation. Her fingers wrapped around mine, warm, trusting, as if she'd been waiting. In that moment, every headline, every whisper, every sleepless night dissolved into silence. At the hospital, fluorescent lights replaced the rain. They checked them both. Dehydration, fever, exhaustion. Nothing fatal, just life worn thin. Alvarez returned with updates. Interpol confirmed. Elena's partner was caught trying to cross into New Zealand. On his phone, fake passports, messages from her. She'll be in custody within 48 hours. I nodded slowly. There was no triumph in me, just the quiet relief of a truth finally finding air. Later, the doctor came out, smiling gently. They're stable. He needs rest. She's healthy. You can see them soon. When I stepped into the room, Mark was half asleep, an IV taped to his arm. Nora lay curled beside him, clutching a stuffed rabbit someone from pediatrics had found. The light through the blinds painted gold stripes across their faces. For a long while, I just watched them breathe. Then Mark opened his eyes. I made everything worse, he said hoarsely. No, I told him. You made everything visible. He frowned, confused. I sat down beside him. I thought I was protecting you by controlling everything. You thought you were protecting me by disappearing. All we did was build higher walls. He managed a faint smile. Guess we're both lousy architects. I laughed, quiet, shaky, real. It felt foreign, like using a muscle that had healed. He looked at Nora. She reminds me of you, he said. Stubborn, brave. She reminds me of you, I replied. Kind, even when it hurts. We fell into silence again, the good kind, the one that holds, not hides. A few hours later, Detective Alvarez stopped by. "They caught Tennant," she said. "He's cooperating. The funds will be recovered. Mark's cooperation is now official record." She hesitated. "The board knows you weren't involved. They're reinstating your pension." I thanked her, but what mattered more was the small note she left on the table before leaving. "He protected you. Now let yourself protect him." That evening, Mark slept deeply, for the first time in months. I sat by the window of his hospital room, watching dusk fall over the river outside. Same water, different eyes. Just like Orion had said. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. A text. "When you look at your son as a man trying to live, not a sinner trying to hide, you'll see the road again." No signature. Didn't need one. I smiled through tears. Orion Sage. Tomorrow there would be hearings, press, paperwork. But none of that mattered tonight. Tonight, truth had done its quiet work. It hadn't erased the pain. It had simply given it purpose. I looked at the two of them sleeping. Father and child, both safe, both mine. The compass I'd carried all this time sat in my palm, its needle trembling before finding north. I whispered to it, "North is right here." Then I placed it on the bedside table and leaned down to kiss my granddaughter's hair. She stirred, smiled in her sleep. "I'm here," I said softly. Words I should have said months ago. Words that built a bridge no storm could wash away. The truth hadn't changed the past. It had simply given love a road to walk forward. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed we were finally walking home. The morning they discharged Mark from the hospital, the world felt different. Not new, just lighter. The sky still carried its usual gray, but it no longer looked heavy. Maybe because I wasn't heavy anymore. We stepped outside together, Mark walking slow, Nora clutching his hand, and me walking behind them. The air smelled like rain had recently forgiven the city. For months, I had begged for this. Proof, justice, answers. But when I finally got them, I realized truth wasn't the real miracle. Forgiveness each was. And forgiveness didn't arrive with thunder or speeches. It came quietly, like a sunrise that no one clapped for. Mark turned to me at the car. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry for what I made you go through." I looked at him, not as the boy who vanished, or the man the world accused, but as someone who had fought a battle I couldn't see. "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry too, for not believing that your silence might have been love." He nodded. For the first time in a long time, our silence felt like understanding instead of distance. Nora climbed into the back seat, holding the pink rabbit from the hospital. She looked out the window at the river as we drove past it. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "that's where Daddy found the stars." I smiled. "Is that so?" Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "She thinks the reflections in the water are stars that fell." "Well," I said, glancing at the river, "maybe she's right. Back home. Home." A word that finally meant something again. I unpacked the few things that had survived. The compass, the chipped mug, a faded family photo, and the little pink ribbon. The walls didn't feel empty anymore. They felt ready. That evening, I made dinner for the first time in months. Not fancy, just chicken soup, warm bread, and the kind of peace that fills the room before the smell does. We ate together, no tension, no questions, just the soft clatter of spoons, Nora humming a tune, and Mark occasionally smiling when she spilled water and giggled. For the first time, I realized, healing doesn't mean forgetting the storm. It means learning to eat again while it's still raining outside. After dinner, I tucked Nora into the guest room. She looked up at me, sleepy-eyed, and whispered, "Grandma, are you sad anymore?" I brushed her hair gently. "A little, but it's a good kind of sad, the kind that makes room for joy." She smiled. "Then I'll dream something happy for you." Her words, simple, pure, landed deeper than any sermon. Children have a way of saying what saints can't. Later that night, after Mark had gone to bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and unapologetic. Across the horizon, the city glowed quietly, unaware of how much it had changed my life. I pulled out my phone. There was one unread message, no name, just a number that didn't need one. "The river carries everything that once tried to drown you. Let it. You're free now. Orion Sage." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you," I whispered to the night. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was. The next morning, I wrote a letter. Not for the world, just for myself, and maybe for whoever needed it someday. If you're reading this, and someone you love has hurt you, I hope you remember that love and pain are neighbors. Sometimes, they even wear the same face. And if you ever feel like forgiveness is too big, start smaller. Start with seeing. Because sometimes, just seeing the truth is enough to start healing. I folded the paper, slipped it into the old family album, and closed it. Not as a goodbye, as a promise. A few days later, Nora found the compass on the table. "What's this?" she asked. "It's how your daddy used to find his way," I said. She tilted it in her hand, watching the needle tremble, then steady. "Does it always know where to go?" "Not always," I said, "but it always tries." She nodded solemnly, as if understanding something much older than her years. Then she handed it back. "Then you should keep it, Grandma. You found your way too." That afternoon, I took Nora to the park. The same park where I had once sat in silence, listening to Orion Sage's words. Now, the benches looked friendlier. The trees seemed to lean closer, like old friends catching up. We fed crumbs to the pigeons. She laughed, chasing one that strutted too close, her voice carrying farther than I expected. And as I watched her, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet joy that had been buried beneath grief. I looked up. A breeze lifted the river's surface, scattering tiny ripples that caught the sunlight. It looked almost like starlight dancing on water. And I remembered what she'd said in the car. Maybe fallen stars weren't broken after all. Maybe they were just learning to shine in a different place. That evening, as the sun sank low, Mark joined me on the porch. He held 2 mugs of tea, one for me, one for himself. "Detective Alvarez called," he said. "They found the money, most of it anyway. And Eleanor? In custody, facing extradition." I nodded. No victory, just closure. Mark took a sip, then looked at me. "What now, Mom?" I smiled. "We live. We tell the story right this time." He looked confused for a second, then realized what I meant. He chuckled. "You think anyone would care to hear it?" "They'll care," I said softly, "because everyone's got someone they're trying to forgive. If you've ever loved someone and lost your way, this story was for you. Maybe it reminded you that love doesn't end. It just changes its form. And if you felt something tonight, take a breath and type yes in the comments. Because sometimes saying yes to life again is the first miracle." Night fell gently, wrapping the house in calm. From inside, I could hear Nora's soft laughter as Mark read her a bedtime story. For the first time in years, the sound of a family felt right again. I closed my eyes listening, and somewhere in that quiet, I could almost hear Orion Sage's voice one last time. "When you stop searching for what's missing, you begin to see what's still alive. That's where love waits." I smiled. He was right. He always was. The stars above the river flickered, the same way they had that night under the bridge. Only this time, they didn't look like loss. They looked like home. If this story touched your heart, tap like, not for me, but for every family trying to find their way home. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that love can survive anything. And don't forget to subscribe to PT Family Drama Stories, guided by Orion Sage, where every story heals a little piece of the heart.